focal emphasis. Is that correct?
Yes.
And this is one of those, for me, I think is another easy one. Some people don't think so. I guess it's all up to the individual as well. The focal emphasis is where your eye lands in an arrangement, or where you're putting your emphasis at, where the center part of your arrangement is. Maybe some even refer to it as the axis point of an arrangement, where things come together. For me, it's the greatest visual impact of an arrangement. And then when we're talking about focal emphasis, you can even break it down to a focal area and what is your focal point. They're two different things. So we're going to talk about focal emphasis first, and then we'll talk about focal point. You can see here, this is a strong line of blue delphinium radiating down to our white Fuji's, okay? So for our focal area of this design is those Fuji's, the focal area being both Fuji's, the focal point being the lowest part of impact. This will be your focal point because that's where your eye ends up. But both of them combined is focal area. This is your focal point. Now, if we're talking about, let's recap about balance. What's the problem with this balance here? Anybody want to quickly type on there, what's the problem with this balance? And which type of balance problem is it? Let me move out of the way where you can see it. I'm sure it blends in with the...
It looks scattered. It's off on color balance.
Color balance is absolutely right. We have the darker color up top, the lighter color at the bottom. Kudos to whoever said that.
Holly Garcia.
Okay, all right. That is the problem we have here because we got the darker color here and the lighter color down here. But as far as focal, we're talking about focal, it is a very strong focal. Okay, you can see that. That's a very strong focal point, and on that would get a minimum of 4 for me. Okay, now we're going to talk about this particular focal. Can you see that? Your eye comes down. We still have this strong line like we do here. This one's a little bit tighter, not quite as tight here. But your eye comes down, and there's nothing really mass to fall on. You can see that. There's some aster there. But your Fuji is on this side, and your Fuji's on that side. So your eye comes down and goes left and right. There's a break in that focal area. This would have been the focal area, but there's no focal point. Does that make sense? Okay, so for me, this would have been probably an average to a below average. Probably would have given them an average, okay? Because they did create, they attempted to create a focal area, but they failed in creating that focal point. I hope that makes sense to you, okay? There again, balance issue. Color balance is off, okay? And listen, folks, not saying that in a day-to-day setting like my flower shop that I would not do this or send this out because it's very pleasing to the consumer and there's nothing wrong with that. But we're talking about competition. Competition is totally, totally different, okay? People will argue, well, if you do it for competition, why wouldn't you do it in your shop? Shop's different. Inventory changes on a daily basis, a minute by minute. That might have been all I had to accommodate that arrangement. For the consumer, it's acceptable, but color balance is off on both of these, okay? So this would have been a minimum of 4 on focal area. This one would have been probably a 3 to below average, I mean an average to below average, okay? Now let's talk about this one. This one, the focal area on here is just not very clear, okay? And the reason I say that is your eye comes down and your focal flower is your sunflower, but you got your sunflower here and then there's a big space between here and here. So it's like there's a break in our focal. Now, if this had been pulled down, and rested in this area where they were a little more closely grouped, it would have been a very strong focal. But your eye comes down and this is the focal area, but being there side by side, there's hard to say what's your focal point. Where if this had been pulled down, it would have been more defined. I hope that makes sense to you. So here on this, again, I would probably give it an average.